So, hi Nikki, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Vicki. It's my absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So, can we start with you please giving an introduction to yourself, your business, and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my name is Nicky Price. I'm a transformation therapist and coach. So, I help women in business predominantly to break through the subconscious barriers to their success. In areas that they're really holding themselves back. But that came after sort of a bit of a crash and burn and a total reinvention of myself as well. So, but I've fallen into this therapy and transformation, which I absolutely love. So, yeah.
Well, thank you. So, I've invited you on today to talk about money blocks. But before we go into the money blocks the common ones that you've identified, can you explain what a money block actually is for someone who hasn't heard that term and why it's important? Why should it matter to the person listening?
Yeah, of course. And money blocks are just kind of one of the many things that hold us back in business. And actually, money block is very rarely a money block. It's actually based from our childhood, as is any block that we have in our mindset. Any block to achieving anything is always stemming from our childhood and how we created our identity and our beliefs about ourselves. So a money block as such is it's just a terminology that's used. It doesn't actually mean anything really in therapy. It's a kind of a terminology that's used for people who identify themselves as not earning enough money or maybe not being able to hold on to enough money or feeling like they're not seen and not heard and not able to receive money or hold on to money. So there's many different kind of connotations, if you like, of what a money block is, but it's essentially it's not having enough, really, isn't it?
Yes. Thank you so much for explaining that because I'm sure lots of us have heard the terminology and sometimes you don't like to ask, do you? You're not quite sure what something means, but you're like, oh, I don't know, I don't want to seem silly, so I won't ask. So I like to ask the silly questions, not so silly questions for everyone. So before we go through your list, I will get onto it in a moment, Nikki. Why do you think so many of us, even those of us who are perhaps quite experienced, we might have been running our businesses for years, still face them? Because I'm sure there's not anybody listening who won't relate to at least one of the things you're going to share with us, myself included.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And women in business face so many different things in business. And I think one of the key things to sort of differentiate is when we're working perhaps in corporate, which was my background, and then you suddenly move to your own business, all of a sudden you're the one fronting your business. And therefore the focus and the intention is on you as opposed to working for somebody else. And so anything that kind of hid away quite nicely behind a regular paycheck and getting something, um, you know, happening all the time, every day to you that you get used to and being in those habits, all of a sudden you're the one that's having to motivate yourself to decide what you do each day and to manage your money. And for people who've not been taught how to do that, then it can be a telling time, of it's just skills that we perhaps haven't learned. So there's a mixture of skills plus the deeper work, which is what I do, which is the subconscious work.
Thank you. I mean, I think running your business is really exposing, isn't it? I know when I first started my first business, I made so many mistakes around money, and I'm sure I'm still making mistakes today. And looking back, I think a lot of it was because I just had no idea what I was
Mm.
doing. Because as you said, I'd also come from a corporate background where every month money arrived in my account, and I knew exactly how much I was going to get, and I knew exactly what I needed to pay out, and there was a lot of security in that. And then suddenly, when I was responsible not only for the money that was for me, but for the money that had to go into my business, I just found that so hard to manage.
Exactly. And it is really hard because, as I say, we are not used to having to put ourselves out there in order to get money or to receive money. And that could be one of the first blocks, actually, that, how do you receive in general in your life? Are you the type of person who overworks, overgives? Because if you are, you're probably got a bit of a block to receiving. How do you receive gifts? How do you receive somebody doing something for you? How do you receive compliments? And those people that kind of brush them off or push them away are probably the exact same with money. They're not going to be open and welcome and receiving. It's actually all about energy. it's nothing to do with a actual physical money block. It is to how we receive in general, because money is just like anything else. It's just that we make it so powerful because it means so much in our lives, that we make these stories around money and we make these beliefs around money, that it makes, some people nasty, that it makes some people good. Money doesn't do any of that. All of that is inherently within us. And it all goes back to our childhood and our programming years, which were actually 0 to 7 years old. That was our programming years. So, what we learned around money in those days was really how our patterns are playing out. And unless we interrupt those patterns and see it for what it is, then we're just going to get stuck playing the same record over and over and over again.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I was listening to another podcast recently, and someone on there was talking of the example of that when she was younger, she picked something up, some money off the street. You know, sometimes you might find a coin, and she picked it up, and her mother said to her, put that down, that's dirty, it's dirty, money's really dirty." Obviously, meaning in the literal
Oh,
sense.
yeah.
And she was talking about how she feels like she really took that to heart, and that even as a successful entrepreneur, she finds it really hard to talk about money or to be open about it, because she had that programming that it was dirty and we don't touch it and we don't talk about it. And I just thought that was so interesting. And I think if I look back, I think I've probably got some similar examples in my own childhood as well. And you just don't realize how ingrained some of this is.
No, you don't. And I think a really good indicator is how do you look at people with money? So if you're at the traffic lights and somebody comes up in a really fast, glamorous, exotic car, what's your initial instinct? Or if somebody comes up dripping in diamonds and gold and in the designer shops, what's your automatic thought when you see people like that? And it's a real indicator of how our subconscious is coping with the level of money that we can receive. In fact, there's a great book called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. I don't know if you've heard of it. And he talks about the upper limit of what we feel we are worthy of receiving in our life. And it's not just money, it's, success, it's love, relationships, all of those things. And again, all of those things are determined by the beliefs that we create about ourselves in those early years between 0 and 7. And it's all around how our needs were met by our parents, what we saw around us, the environment that we grew up in, and what we heard and saw a lot going on around us. And so really to understand what your thoughts about money are is, well, what's your current state with money? Because if you're not where you want to be, but you're doing well, then you're on the right pathway. But if you're hitting an upper limit every month, and this was me, by the way, in my first business, I hit the same limit every month. Didn't even realize it, because you've got money coming in and going out, and you don't really realize until you do your tax return. You think, oh, look at that. And I'd hit the same limit that I was earning in corporate. I'd never seemed to be able to get above that limit. So it's about expanding your ability to receive and looking at some of the limiting beliefs that are holding yourself back. And they're often not linked to money. Mine certainly won't.
That's so interesting. And you're right, that is a great book. I actually have it on my shelf over here. It's a brilliant book. And actually, like you say, it really shows you where you're getting in your own way. Because I
Mm.
think that it's often us that's the problem, not the money or the time or something else. That's what I took from the book anyway. That actually the biggest
Mm.
problem is me.
Yeah. And it always comes back to us. And I think that the moment that we recognize that and stop playing the victim, that life is happening to us, and start to realize that actually everything that's showing up for us in our life is a direct reflection of what's going on inside in our subconscious, because our subconscious is driving 95% of the day and is 95% of our mind. And we had that programming when we were a child. So it's, maybe it's time for an upgrade, version 2.0 instead of the original. But most people will just go through life with that original programming and hardly change a thing. They'll just have those beliefs. How my needs were met denotes how worthy I am. If you grew up in an environment where you were constantly judged or criticized, then you're going to believe you're not worthy of success. If you're told often enough that you're useless and, anything, all the nasty things that can come out of parents' mouths without even realizing it. And if they're constantly judged, constantly criticized, then they're going to grow up feeling very, not worthy of success, and that creates our upper limit that the Gay Hendricks talks about.
Thank you, Nikki. I really feel like you're going to enlighten all of us today as to some things about ourselves perhaps we hadn't even realised. And I think that's a really good starting point. So, shall we go through your list of money blocks? If you want to
Yeah,
go through one at a time, and then we can sort of pause and reflect on each one as we go.
absolutely. And as I say, these are not necessarily always linked to money, but they're the patterns. There's loads of books around this sort of thing, and the blocks vary, but these are the ones that measure up with what I see in my practice, very often. And so I've got a list of them here. So the first one is shame. And that's really around, I'm not feeling worthy of wealth based on what you grew up in, how you believe about yourself, what you were told about yourself, and what you believed about yourself based on experiences. So that's number one. Number two is that money is evil. How many times do we watch TV programs as a child that the rich person was the bad one, the evil one? And if anything has happened to you in terms of, maybe you got bullied at school for having money or not having money, then you will make the assumption that having money or not having money is not a good thing. It's evil. What's the next one? Hard work. Yes. How many of it? I think every single one of us has this one. Making money is hard. And we're told that, aren't we, over and over again by parents, do you think money grows on trees? Do you think, you've got to work really hard to put your money away and, work so many hours? And that's just so not true. Because when you look at millionaires, they are leveraging time and not for money. They're not leveraging their time against money. They're leveraging their time to create freedom by leveraging other people to do work. Yeah. So the people that work the hardest, if that were true, the people that work the hardest would be the wealthiest. And they're not. They're really not, are they? So hard work, making money is hard. Trust is a big one as well. I don't trust myself with money. If we've ever had money and then lost it or done something stupid, and who hasn't? Everybody's had a disaster, or you bought something that perhaps you didn't want, and then you stop trusting yourself with money. Or maybe you got an inheritance and you let it all slip through your fingers. And really, that is about our subconscious ability to hold on to money based on our belief. But that is nothing, again, to do with actual money. But it's why most lottery winners are broke within sort of 3 to 5 years after winning the lottery. It's because their subconscious hasn't caught up in terms of having the ability to receive. So that's trust. Safe. This is another big one. Feeling safe to hold on to money. And that's very often linked to childhood bullying again. It's not safe for me to have this money, to have it or not to have it. It's about feeling safe with money. Maybe money got stolen. Maybe money just wasn't a good thing. Bad things happened to you and you've made the association. And what's the last one? Oh, yeah, the last one is money just leaves. And that's kind of synonymous as everything leaves in my life. Partners, money, everything in my life just doesn't hang around. And so, as you can see, all of these are actually not very much to do with money itself. They're to do with our belief system, what we believe is safe, and what we believe we're worthy of having. And those are kind of the biggest links, if you like, to money.
Yeah, thank you so much. These are more, I guess they're more mindset blocks than anything,
Yeah,
aren't they?
yeah, totally.
So, and we don't need to go through all of these, Nikki, but perhaps just take one or two, and maybe you could let us know how might these show up day to day for somebody, particularly somebody that's running a business, because I feel like lots of us would have listened to the list and said, "Oh no, that's not me, that's not," or maybe we will have said, that's me." But for those of us who are sort of saying, "Oh, does that apply to me or not?" Could you give us a few examples just of how this might show up so that we can see if we can recognise
Yeah, I'm
ourselves?
trying to think of probably the most common one. I think the most common one really is all going to be around the money doesn't seem to come to me. I just don't get enough. I can't receive it. And I say this is very much linked to our own self-worth. So it will play out that maybe in your business, if you're trying to put yourself out there, if you've got a product business, if you're trying to put yourself out there, you're trying to do adverts, you're being shown things that work for other people, but they don't seem to work for you. You seem to have this block on being seen, being heard, being able to receive, and being able to hold and bring in the money. So it's not even arriving. So it's not leaving, it's just not even arriving. It's not coming to you. So it's kind of like there's this whole invisibility thing going on. And the root causes of all these kind of things are so wild sometimes. To me, they make perfect sense. But to, kind of somebody who is sitting there just thinking, well, why is it not coming to me? I don't understand why I just don't seem to get seen. It's because your mind has made an association somewhere in the past that being seen, being heard, being able to receive abundance is not safe. So, the root cause of everything that we ever hold in our lives that is not good is down to two things: being hurt or scared in the past, and your mind is creating some connection between what you're trying to achieve and what you're able to achieve. So it's basically your conscious mind versus your subconscious mind. So in your conscious logical mind, you're saying, I want to earn this money, I want to sell my products, I want to be seen, I want to be heard. But if there's a conflict in the subconscious mind that says, no, that's not safe. And it's not safe because you got bullied when you were 5 years old, you felt shame, you felt horror, you felt hurt. So that is never happening again. And that's what our mind does. In that moment of trauma, whatever it was that happens, if you think about any kind of trauma, you hold your breath. And in that moment, you hold your breath, it gets stored in the body, and your body just holds on to it. And that recognizes that level of safety is then stored almost like a little thermostat, then says, right, when you hit that, you're not going to get seen anymore, you're not going to get heard. It's safer to stay out of the way. It's safer to play small. So, it's difficult for some people to see. What you're seeing is the surface patterns, you're seeing the symptoms. And so the biggest thing is about tuning in to where you're getting the resistance. If you're not receiving money, what is the pattern? Because it's not just about money. Where else are you not being seen? Where else are you not being heard? Where else are you not feeling visible? And visibility is if you just don't feel seen at all, that usually stems back to childhood, where perhaps you grew up in a volatile home and you couldn't predict what mum and dad what sort of mood they were going to be in. So you learned to just keep quiet until you found out. And those patterns will play forward into adulthood as being hypervigilant, being able to be very observant of other people. And you can have some very good traits out of it, but it also will hold you back. If you're permanently sort of analyzing to see if it's safe for you to do something, and your subconscious has already said, no, it's not safe. We always need to have a back on. You are going to instinctively hold yourself back. And it's subconscious. You don't even know you're doing it, but you are.
That's really interesting. Thank you. Shall I tell you, or can I tell you the one that related the most to me? Because this
Yes.
might be, I can, because I'm very happy to share how it shows up as well. So the one that relates the most to me from the six is that money is hard work,
Yeah.
because I know that I feel really guilty if money comes in and I feel like I haven't earned it. And how it comes up for me a little bit is with pricing, because if something's very easy for me, even if it's hard for somebody else, I find it very hard to price accordingly, because to me it's easy. So why should I get reimbursed for something that for me is just easy? Or I
Mm.
enjoy. If I like doing this and I'm good at it and it's easy for me, why should I get paid for that? As
Yeah.
silly as that might sound to everyone, and I'm aware it might sound silly, I know that's my biggest one.
It's so common though. It's so common because if we have a belief, and here's the thing about our identity. See, the beliefs that we make in those early years, 0 to 7, and we're told over and over again, you must work hard, nothing ever comes easily, you must have it hard. Those beliefs, they create a blueprint in your mind, because 0 to 7 years old, you don't have the logical thinking mind. It's not formed yet. And so all of this is going directly into the subconscious mind. And so in the conscious mind, when that's formed at 8 years old, the subconscious mind then seals shut. So you now have that belief money is hard work. I have to work hard to get money. So that's there, that's sitting there as a belief. And then the strongest force in the human psyche is that we must act in accordance with our beliefs. It cannot be any other way. And if your belief is it must be hard, then you will sabotage any time that it's easy until you change that belief. And so the work, if you like, the inner work to kind of heal that is, well, where did I first hear this? And if I did have to work hard for money, what else did I have to work hard for? And a really good kind of journaling prompt, if you like, is whose love did I have to work the hardest for in my home? Because you will have adapted your behavior around everything to get your needs met from that person. So if you had to work hard for love from dad, it's working hard for everything. It's not just working hard for money. It's working hard for acceptance. It's working hard for love. It's working hard to have these core needs met. So your core needs is I need to feel safe, I need to feel loved, I need to fit in, I mustn't be rejected, I must feel connected. It's just a mammal thing. We must connect with our parents. And so anytime that we don't connect, we're making these beliefs, well, it must be me, I must work harder. Yeah. And so whose love did you have to work the hardest to get? That will be your kind of clue, if you like, on where the pattern has come from. Because if your mum or your dad constantly said, you know, or was just emotionally unavailable and very rarely gave you compliments, very rarely was even there. You know, maybe you have abandonment issues as well on top of everything else. But, you know, if that parent was very hard to show love, then that child is going to think there's something wrong here. I'm not connecting. I need to get him to show me love. They don't think that it's their fault. They think it's the child's fault themselves. And so you create these beliefs. I'm not good enough. This part of me, I must hide it away and I must learn to connect. I must do something that will make him love me. So if I work hard at this and if I'm good, and this is how people become people pleasers, overgivers, underchargers, people who undercharge a lot are usually the overworkers and the overgivers, constantly worrying about the other person, what they think all the time, because they've learnt to do that. They've learnt to work very, very hard to get that parent to give them and show them the love they need. Does that make sense, that it's linked to your values?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and I'm thinking, wow, I'm going to have to go away and journal a bit on all of this because
Yeah.
I think I have to listen back. This is really useful. Thank you.
No, you're welcome.
Um, no, that's really good. I'm going to move it away from myself for a moment because I would
Yeah.
love to know, do you find that some of these blocks are more common than others, particularly among business owners? Are there any patterns that you see?
Yeah, and when you mix in, so if we kind of take it away from just the money blocks, how many women do you hear sort of, especially when they're moving out of a job and then into their own business, they might say, "Oh, I feel like I'm an imposter," or I mean, a lot of corporate people talk about imposter syndrome. In fact, some of the best known people in the world say they struggle with imposter syndrome. Visibility fears, procrastination, perfectionism. Those two are huge for women in business. Just generalized anxiety, this kind of low level anxiety. I've got to put myself out there, because one of the worst things for us as a child is rejection in any form. And so if we've learned that perhaps just one time we did something in class and we were not perfect at it and somebody tried to pull us down, immediately your mind steps in to try and protect you and says, right, well, we won't do that again. And unless you're constantly doing it every day so that it becomes a new pattern that can then get stored in the subconscious mind, then it's going to stay the same as it was originally, whatever that original pattern was. So, yes, overworking, money blocks, procrastination, perfectionism, imposter syndrome, all of those come up very, very regularly. And really, they're just all rooted in a sense of, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. So I need to hide that part of me away. There's some part of me that, is shameful or has been shamed in the past, judged, criticized, shamed. made small, made not feel like they're worthy of receiving something. And that's all the blocks that we ever have, really. But any time we have this kind of scarcity about what we can achieve and what we can bring into our life, we're coming from a place of limitations, and we're not limited at all. But it's just moving that from the conscious to the subconscious. You can make all the changes you want in your bless you. You can make all the changes, or try to make all the changes you want in your conscious mind, through motivation, pushing through, hard work. And if you can push through, you will eventually move that over to the subconscious, and it will be your new belief. So you can change, but it's only when there's a deep, deep conflict there that the problems happen. So let me give an example of a money block. I worked with a client recently, and I looked at her business. She had an amazing potential business, supremely intelligent, but she just wasn't charging her worth. And she was earning about 5K a month. And when we worked on her blocks, they were so deep in terms of money. She was born and brought up in a Eastern European country. And then they moved to Germany, and they moved from affluent side to very not affluent side, where she was bullied so much for having, an amount of money, to the point where money to her just was not safe at all. And it was so deeply wired in through so many situations where there was bullying, that we had to literally kind of unpick them all. But she's now earning 40, 50 grand a month. Her business was sound. It was there. The whole structure was there. But that's just sort of so much proof that you can have all the strategy and all the techniques and all the advertising and everything, but it's not going to work if you don't have the belief that you're worthy, or it's safe for you to receive. And once we were able to unpick that and plant some new suggestions directly into the subconscious mind through hypnosis, then you're able to move forwards. That's the way.
Thank you. I really like that example. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for everything you shared. One thing I'd really love to know is if someone recognizes themselves in anything you've spoken about today, because I think that for a lot of us, something will come up where we say, oh, that sounds like me, or I do that, or maybe I've got that belief. Where do we start? What do
So
we do?
that's a really good question. And everything, I mean, I think it was Carl Jung, who's a great philosophist. He said, I've got his quote here actually: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And so what he means by that is your unconscious is programmed from the early ages, but it's running your day. 95% of your day is being run by your subconscious mind. So until you bring it into your awareness, into your conscious mind, you can't change it, because those thoughts, beliefs, and habits and actions and behavior are all sitting there in your subconscious, creating your outcome. So if you don't like the outcome that you're getting today, this minute is the only time that you can change it. So you have to bring it into your conscious awareness. And that's the first thing. So you notice the pattern, and then understand that the pattern is the symptom. It's not the root cause. It's the symptom of what's going on. Let me give you a completely random example of that. So I used to, I've never been an angry person, but I would flare up with anger in certain circumstances. And it wasn't until I did this work that I'd think, gosh, why do I get so angry about that? And I realized I was only ever getting angry. It was always with my husband as well. And it was only ever when I felt like he was trying to suggest I was not intelligent in some way. And this this red mist would go up, and I would just absolutely flare up. And I realized that's, anger is not the problem. It was the anger was protecting the core wound. And the core wound was criticism and judgment in the past of not feeling as intelligent as my sister, who was the golden child, and I was always trying to keep up, was never as good. So that was the core wound, which really hurt. And so if anyone just triggered that, just press that little button by just going, oh, what, are you stupid or something? Oof. And then they go, I was only joking. But you don't. It's the protector that comes out. And that's what we have. So what you're seeing in your patterns in your day to day, if you have the same type of relationships over and over again, it's the same thing. You're seeing the symptom and not the root cause. This is why people go from marriage to marriage to marriage and end up divorce, divorce, divorce. Because unless you heal the first thing, the inner thing, the core wound, then it's not going to change anything. Does that
That
make
makes a lot
sense?
of sense. It makes a lot of sense. Thank you. And actually, what I took from that is if somebody is recognizing themselves or maybe even feeling a little bit triggered by something, that's actually a positive thing because,
Mm,
as you said, it brings it into your consciousness. So
yes.
actually, it's a very, very good thing to suddenly think, oh, that sounds a bit like me. So
Yeah.
that's a
And it's
really positive step.
Yeah, because literally most people will just say, "Oh, I got angry again, so what?" and move away, and they don't think about what just happened. Because all the clues, if we just turn in to what just happened and just think, "Oh, curiosity," instead of shaming yourself. "Oh, I don't know why I did that." Constant rumination, going over it over and over again in your mind. "I wish I hadn't done that. Wonder what they think about me. Should I post that? Should I say that to that person?" That all comes from this place of I'm needing my needs to be met on the outside, but it starts on the inside. You've got to just look at the pattern and turn into it and say, well, okay, I may not have been good enough in those days, but does that mean that about me now? I have the same brain as Richard Branson, Oprah Winfrey, all the incredibly successful people in the world. I've got the same hardware that they have. So is it just me that's telling myself stories? Yes, is the answer to that. You are a limitless human being. And the moment you just decide in that moment to question it, if you think about when we questioned the belief about Father Christmas, we were able to just let it go. Once we understood that how could that man possibly climb down all those many chimneys, we were able to let that belief go. And in the same way, once you question it, provide proof to the opposite, then you're able to start to make the changes.
That's really helpful, Nikki. Thank you. So, one final question for you before we wrap up is what would your number one piece of advice be when it comes to overcoming any of the blocks that we've spoken about today?
Number one piece. I think, your highest level that you're going to achieve is your highest level limiting belief. And to understand that you are limitless. So if you are limitless, what story is it that you're telling yourself that you can't do or can't have what it is that you're trying to achieve? And turn into it. Back to what we were just saying. Tune into it and look at it with curiosity, not with shame or anger or fear or embarrassment. None of those low level thoughts, because they keep you in a very low energetic frequency. We hear this all over TikTok and Insta, don't we, about energetic vibe? Well, it's very real, not in the way they're all saying it on there, but your vibration, your energetic frequency denotes what you're going to attract back. Every thought has a frequency, and every action and every outcome and what you are saying about yourself. If you just say to yourself, "Oh, you're horrible, you stupid, why did you do that?" It just is a sinking, contracting feeling. But if you just sit there and go, "Yeah, you've got this. Okay, we messed up. Doesn't matter. Let's look at what I've got to learn from this situation," and treat every obstacle that you come across as a learning, and you won't go far wrong if you can look at it that way.
That's brilliant advice. Thank you so much, Nikki. Thank you for everything you've shared. Now, I know you mentioned before we started recording you have a special gift for listeners. Could you tell us what that is, please?
Yeah, I just thought I've put together, it's only a short video, it's about 28 minutes long, that just kind of goes into this a little bit deeper, how we form our core beliefs and how we shape our whole belief system that denotes how we're going to turn out, so our personality. And in there, I've put three of the top ones that affect women in business. And that's for your listeners. So the link is mebutfree.com, which is my website, mebutfree.com/Vicki, because this is your program and your podcast. So it's for your people. And they can go and watch that. There's no opt in required on that. They can just watch that. So I hope they find it interesting.
That's brilliant, and that's so kind of you. Thank you so much, Nikki.
You're so welcome.